Many people say that they want their funeral to be a celebration rather than a mourning. Has anybody actually attended, or seriously planned, a fun funeral? What happened? A couple months ago, I was out on my back deck. My house backs onto a park. There was a big event happening at the skate park. Food was being BBQ'd. There was a bouncy castle. There was a skate competition going on. Balloons. DJ speaker system. I didn't know what was going on and went on with my business in the backyard. About 30 minutes later, a guy comes on the PA and announces to the crowd something along the lines of this. "Hi, my name is Chris and I am Dave's brother. Dave said when he died he didn't want a funeral. He wanted a celebration and he wanted people to see what he loved to do. He spent a lot of time at this skate park. So in his memory, instead of a miserable funeral, we are holding a skate competition in his honor. Help yourself to some food, have fun, dance, sign up for the competition if you skate." Pauses. Holding back tears. "This is for you, bro. I miss you." I was mind blown. It was a really sweet gesture and a great way to remember somebody for who they were. I love this, really. New Orleans has a tradition of marching slowly to the graveyard, mourning, then a ceremony and a dancing jazz party on the way back to the church, where food and drinks are. The party continues from there. I've always thought this is good psychology, mourn, but celebrate also. Kinda wish funeral homes would offer this as an option. Bet a lot of people would like it. My great grandpa made it very public that he had lived a great life and his last wish was he just wanted to live to 100 so he could brag to his dad in heaven because his dad died at 99. He died 2 days after his 100th birthday. His funeral was basically a party. Lots of jokes were told. Lots of drinks were had. Only happy tears. R.I.P. Pappy. Now you need to beat him to 101 years old. You clearly have the genes and medicine is more advanced than ever. You can do it. I attended a friend of a friend's funeral as support. It was really quiet in the church as Knocking on Heaven's Door, Yellow Submarine, and Highway to Heck played. It was what he wanted, but everyone else was still a bit too sad and shell-shocked for them to enjoy it. At my dad's memorial we had Thunderstruck. He'd insisted. Most people were weirded out, but it was perfect for him. When my great-grandpa died, my grandma had a dinner at her house and his closest friends and family came over to share stories about his life and accomplishments. It wasn't fun exactly, but it was a celebration of his life rather than a mourning that he passed. It was nice, it was small, and it was a great way to honor his memory. I want a party when I die, but if one kid fkin flosses on my dead body I am waking right TF up. In Lakota culture, a year after the death there is a ceremony called the wiping of the tears to release the grief from the past year. After the ceremony there is a feast and a giveaway where the family will give away items to all who attend: quilts, toys, kitchen stuff, etc. My grandfather's was held at a powwow, so there was an honor song for him that we all danced to. With the powwow going on, it was like a festival atmosphere. Whoa, that's a great idea. American culture is lacking when it comes to so many things. Death is a big one. This seems like it would be helpful. A childhood friend of mine got killed by a drunk driver when he was like 19, and always said this. His funeral wasn't exactly a part, but it was genuinely amazing how many people from how many walks of life came to share stories about him. Like hospice patients he took care of, the kids he smoked weed with, old school friends. There was just this huge sense of everybody loved this guy. He was a wonderful person. We were so lucky to have him. I think a lot of people learned a lot about him when everyone from pothead skater kids to old men in wheelchairs from his job were coming up to speak. The real party was later though. His friends organized a sort of small live music event party afterwards. It became an annual event where all his friends get together to celebrate for years after his death. Not sure if it's still going, but it was great to see this big party every year for him. To have that broad an impact at the age of 19 is impressive. Sounds like a special guy. My mother owns a venue and has memorials and services quite often, but the coolest one I had seen and worked was for this girl's father. She came to us saying her dad had passed suddenly after his birthday and wasn't able to attend the giant surprise concert they had put together for him with all his old bandmates and all his friends in other bands. I guess he was a huge old school metal punk and used to throw dessert concerts. and draw the flyers and stuff. She said her mum was just so distraught she couldn't imagine forcing her to put together a memorial, let alone one that wasn't celebrating the man he was. So the daughter went on with the concert in her dad's memory, and I mean full-blown concert. They had flyers made and designed after the very first one he ever drew, kegs, a taco truck, and an amazing candy buffet with all his favorites, even hundreds of cases of his favorite locally brewed beers. It was so amazing to see everyone come together and just celebrate this person. I'm a metalhead myself, so the music was pretty awesome if I do say so myself. And the way everyone had a chance to pay their respects for him was just an amazing experience. Would want the same for myself, and I definitely cried a few times at how just amazing and beautiful it was. That's a dang good memorial. In Ireland, I'm not sure for other countries, but it's normal to have a funeral where loads of people gets drunk and stay most of the day in the pub. Reddit has led me to believe this is an average day in Ireland. When I was in 8th grade, we had to do a project where we had to find someone who had lived through the Great Depression and World War II and interview them for their life story. As luck would have it, I was seeing my grandparents who were out of town for the first time in a while, and I picked my grandfather. He wasn't all that old, I want to say late 60s, and he laughed and recounted as much as he could for what seemed like hours. My mom lent me one of those old school recording devices that look like an answering machine, and I wrote out my report using that. I also made a display board for my class, and my grandmother mailed me copies of a bunch of my grandfather's old pictures. Got an A. A couple years passed and my grandfather died. He was a very important guy in the horse racing community, organized the Kentucky Derby, and his funeral was immense. As a kid, I wasn't part of the receiving line, so I waited my turn to go pay respects like everyone else. While waiting in the line, I saw my display board. My mother had shipped it to my grandma at her request, and people were standing in front of it and reading all about him. Around another corner was the recording, playing for the line on repeat. Just my grandfather's voice telling a kid playfully what life was like back when he was a kid, how his parents used to be, how he met my grandmother, what his first jobs were, all the while laughing and having a great time. There were people standing around it in a circle just listening, giving up their spots in line. My grandmother told me that there were people asking about which professional services she used for the prep work that went into the funeral, specifically the interview tapes and the display boards, and she got a chance to laugh it off and explain it was a project I did in middle school. So many people came up to me to share more stories about how they got into all kinds of hijinks with my grandpa during the war, or knew him from his marketing days. I wouldn't classify it as a fun funeral, but it certainly is etched in my memory as a celebration of his life more than anything else. That's just beautiful, really. It would be great to have recordings of all lost loved ones. My mom's best friend planned her own funeral a few days before her death. The receiving was a hula party where everyone had to wear Hawaiian shirts and leis and grass skirts. Then at her funeral she made us pallbearers carry her into the service 5 minutes after it was scheduled to begin so she could be late to her own funeral. A friend also did the late to her own funeral thing for his mother. Started the eulogy off with a knowing laugh from the attendees. Instead of a funeral, we held a block party barbecue for my dad. We roped off the cul-de-sac with a permit, served his favorite foods, played his favorite music nice and loud, stocked up on the box wine he infamously loved, and invited everybody he knew. We had pictures of him up as a mini gallery of sorts. It was nice. People drank, laughed, and told stories about him. We must have had at least 24 people, maybe as many as 50. All told, I wasn't in a great headspace, so it's a bit of a blur of people. We got a lot of compliments, though. He would have liked it a lot. My cousin died young from cancer. He was in his early 40s with 2 school-age daughters. No one knew his plans. They had a reception at a hall with a small band and plenty of food and alcohol. A cousin got up and gave a moving speech, everyone crying. He sits down and the band jumps right into a trumpet blaring rendition of When the Saints Go Marching In. Everyone in attendance looked up, looked at the band, and roared with laughter. From then on it was a great party. I have a very strange, large, redneckish family. One of my grade 2nd removed super great aunts, or something like that, died last year. She had been sick for a long time. After the viewing, we all went to the bar and got hammered telling stories. She was salt of the earth. She wouldn't have been appalled that we even laid her out and people were crying. True badass woman. Literally one of the women that took over in factories when the men were away in World War II. She'd be embarrassed to see how many people showed up and cried over her body. So we all went out and got hammered and cheersed her. I didn't pour one out. Didn't think the bar would like that. Heck with the bar. Your shoulder poured that dame too. My high school drama teacher's stepfather apparently has an envelope full of instructions for when he dies. One is that they play Celebration at the after party of his funeral and everyone has a dance off. They must be laughing and smiling. I think there may be a prize involved. That is how you honor this man when the time comes. Have the best party full of antics and laughter and love. Historically, where I'm from, the religious belief, before Catholicism made its way over, was when one died in this world there was a rebirth in the next, so you celebrated the new birth in the next life. To an extent, a birth in this world meant a death in the other, so a slight mourning for that. Anyway, that means a death in this world was always celebrated. This culture has continued and funerals can be a great party. Obviously if it is a child dying of cancer it's a different story, but if it is somebody who had a good life there is a lot of drinking and partying involved. People who come from other areas are perplexed by the way the island deals with funerals at times, but almost always prefer it. The best way I can describe it is a lot of people speak about how good a wedding was, but we speak the same way about a funeral. At times they are looked forward to more than a wedding. I think that's beautiful. My closest childhood friend had a love for those creepy ceramic clown dolls since we were children. When she passed, she wrote directs for her funeral, which included the presence of her favorite 100 clown dolls, and at least 5, but no more than 16 funeral clowns. If you got 16 funeral clowns, I think you'd have the whole supply. We had an amazing party for my cousin's husband. He was a larger than life, tell it like it is, hard partying guy. If you were part of his family you never doubted he loved you, and heaven help you if wronged one of his. You know, the hard scrabble ex-gangster type. His celebration had a killer band, dancing, his favorite foods cooked by his favorite people, good drink and good smoke. Ended up renting a hall for everyone that wanted to be there. There were tears, but far more laughter. His memorial slideshow was To Funeral by Lucas Graham. Miss that guy and his bear hugs so much. Everyone welcome to my funeral. Everyone I know better be wasted. You know I would pour one up, cause the way I lived, it was amazing. I played the organ for the funeral of a man who was a devoted Star Wars fan. All the music, from start to finish, was based on movie themes. The pallbearers were dressed in highly detailed Star Wars costumes. Even the eulogist was in an Obi-Wan Kenobi outfit and held a lightsaber in his hand, right to the cemetery. When my grandma died we had a celebration of life at a church, but my aunt bought a crap ton of champagne. This was 2011 and that is when I learned that champagne comes in magnums. And let me tell you, getting drunk at a church is exactly the kind of fun my grandma would have wanted. Also the urn they put her ashes in looked just like a cocktail shaker, so all in all it was a pretty fun and appropriate event. There was one of those here in the Philippines that I saw on the news a year ago. During the procession, the hearse was blasting up big party music, and relatives and friends were dancing while trailing behind. There were plenty of naysayers on social media, but I think the majority was in favor of it, considering it's what the deceased would have wanted. I didn't know the deceased, but I was dating a woman who was related to him. The interment was done quickly and without ceremony, but on the following weekend we went to his house. He was a widower but had several grown kids and a flock of grandkids. He loved the 4th of July, so even though this was September his house was covered with patriotic bunting and there was a huge BBQ going. 7 grills. Many family stories were exchanged and there was plenty laughter. At one point in the afternoon all of the grandkids, maybe 18-20, lined up on the wide front porch and took turns doing stand-up comedy routines. The mic carried their voices across the crowd and out onto the lake, where there was a few canoes. Their jokes were what you'd expect, but the kids were just so dang adorable as they flubbed punklines and waved their arms around to illustrate the jokes that the crowd was constantly laughing. A perfect send-off for the old guy. Hope I get something like that when my day comes. I have told my wife that all I want is a Viking funeral followed by a party. Stick me in the canoe, light it on fire and send me into the lake ocean. My husband's cousin Sue died of cancer in her 40s. It was very sad. Sue's parents decided to hold a remembrance for her the next summer at the family beach vacation, and encouraged the extended family to travel to that rather than to the funeral. Some family members also went to the funeral, but everybody who could came to the beach remembrance. There was food and lots of alcohol, and the musicians in the family played music. There were pictures up of Sue, and Sue's parents and husband gave speeches. But mostly it was a big family and friend party without a lot of structure. Sue loved hosting and loved it when the family was together. It felt like a fitting tribute. The kids went swimming in the ocean before and after. I helped by figuring out the margarita blender. Most of the family hung out together for a week at the beach before and after the remembrance. I don't know that I'd lobby for doing a remembrance party funeral. It was a lot of work. I think Sue's parents welcomed the distraction of planning and executing the party. I think it helped them to have that to look forward to and to keep them busy. But I don't think I'll be in any state to deal with planning a big party when somebody close to me dies. I know you still have to plan a traditional funeral, but there are people to walk you through that planning and do the legwork. So I'll keep it in mind as an option, but we'll just have to see what feels right when the time comes. My dad's funeral wasn't a normal funeral. My dad had been a lifelong Philadelphia sports fan. My brother said we should bury him in a Flyers jersey. My mom and I agreed. Then, it spiraled into everyone wears a jersey sports shirt. The funeral home put out a big Flyers flag for him. We had the hospice pastor say a few words, and even he wore a Phillies jersey. We made jokes. My aunt, my dad's sister, jokingly asked my mom when she was planning on dating again. My dad's side of the family was never one for showing weakness or tact. It's great. I cried the entire time, but it was a nice send-off. Even when we visit him at the cemetery, it's a fun time. Bring him flowers. I always make snide remarks about the way the grounds are weed whacked. My dad kept a great lawn. Bright flowers. My one aunt took her grandson once to visit and he asked if he could throw snowballs at Uncle Pat. My aunt told him go ahead, and he laughed and had a ball. She said she got some weird looks, but my dad would have found that hysterical. As for my mom's funeral, my cousin, mom, and I laughed at Norman Rockwell Museum in the basement of the funeral home. We snuck when the funeral director told my family to be quiet and listen for directions to the cemetery. This is the aforementioned dad's side. My mom had 14 kids. All of them allowed. There's 41 grandkids and now there's great grandkids, plus spouses, other family members, and a random assortment of people. We're not being quiet. And when we buried her, we did shots of Pepsi, my mom's favorite drink. My dad was always the spiritual one in the family. He believed in ghosts. He was the one I went to for comfort when my other 3 grandparents passed. He never wanted anyone to be sad, even when he was sick. He didn't want my brother and me to stop living our normal lives. One of my last memories of him is, I was sitting in his hospice room crying. He wasn't himself at that point. He was agitated, confused. He called me right over and gave me the biggest hug. It was okay to be sad, but it shouldn't be all sad. He wouldn't have wanted that. A celebration of life is better, and that's what I want when I pass. I hate gatherings, but I want it to be fun. My cousin, a diehard Flyers fan, passed suddenly at 50. They had a large orange and white flower piece next to the casket where the florist had spray painted all the harder green ferny things a glossy black. It was gorgeous, and went well with a jersey on an easel next to it. He would have loved it. An old friend of mine committed suicide, early 20s, having suffered from depression for many years since her early teens. It was obviously a very emotional funeral for everyone, but at the wake we all got really drunk, doing shots with her mum and sister, and ended up just partying until late, as it felt like she would have wanted us to have some fun. I personally hadn't seen some of the attendees for a while, and we spent a long time reminiscing about the great times we've had, memories shared. Both of my Irish grandparents had an open bar at their wakes. Both very popular in their old neighborhood and came from a real big family. Everyone just reminisced about them and exchanged funny stories. Actually had fun there, didn't realize it was a sad event until the closing prayer and the funeral itself. I've been to ones that wanted to be that kind of thing. I won't say they were actually fun, but there was an effort to speak about what we enjoyed about the person rather than why we'll miss them, and then it's basically just a family get together with food. That's kind of how we ran my mom's funeral, only, at the end, we played her favorite song, The Mississippi Squirrel Revival by Ray Stevens. She raised that kind of a family. I probably missed the train on this, but my mom's funeral was definitely a fun one. My mom died in early September of 2012. Not sure if anyone remembers, but it was a record-breaking hot summer that lasted well into October. The funeral was insanely hot and obviously everyone was wearing black and in stuffy church-appropriate clothing. At the reception, my little sister, 13 at the time, begged to jump in the pool and my response was, "Your mom just killed herself. You can do whatever you want." So sure enough, my sister changes out of her black long sleeve dress and hops in the pool. My little sister was begging people to jump in with her and everyone wanted to but was too embarrassed to be the first, so my sister asked my dad and all his law enforcement buddies to help throw my high school friends into the pool. Within an hour or so, a dozen of grown men were wrestling my high school friends and everyone was being thrown in the pool, kids and adults alike. Shoes were soaked, phones and watches ruined, and everyone was laughing hard for the first time all week. This is beautiful. I'm so sorry for your loss. At my granny's funeral, the funeral meal was held at a restaurant with a playground. All the grandchildren, ages 10-28 at the time, did everything possible there. Swings, seesaws, slides. Event A adults joined it. Best day ever. We had a metal show. Everyone was together. The music was great. We raised some money to go towards his final expenses. And while there were a lot of tears shed, we had a lot of fun at the same time. Least traditional funeral I've ever been to. Not exactly a party, but definitely non-traditional. My uncle used to have an annual event at his place where people would come and hang out all weekend and they would camp and cook outdoors in Dutch ovens and all sorts of weird stuff, celebrating some other old men he knew that would take trains out west to work the harvest many years ago. It was an unofficial hobo festival of sorts. On the last day they would always fire off a huge Civil War era cannon. The cops would be called. Fun would be had. There was always one man that was in charge of the cannon. When he died they had him cremated and fired his ashes out the cannon, and that memorial service was way more party than sad, and now they've done this twice. When another one of the friends died, and I have a feeling that won't be the last cannon funeral I attend. My dad passed away in 2009. I was 14. He was 41. I felt like I knew my dad very well since we were so close. What I didn't know was how sick he was his whole life. He knew he wasn't going to be in my life forever. He was a super funny guy. Here's an example. My dad and his younger sister went with my grandmother to put her dog down. Her dog was a Chihuahua and had this one eye that poked out of her head. His sister whispered to him after they injected the dog and asked if she was really dead. My father replied, "Well, when I poked her eye, it went back in and she didn't bite me. I think she's dead." All of his licenses photos were really funny as well. One time, he sneezed during the photo and they let him keep it. His last license photo, we stopped at CVS beforehand and got a neck brace for him to wear during the photo. Absolute hilarious guy. The first thing on his will, the very first thing, was him instructing his family to place Groucho Marx glasses on him during his viewing as well as when they buried him. Unfortunately, his mom was not for it, so they just placed the glasses in his pocket, as well as all the license photos. Throughout his life, he didn't want people to worry about him, so he learned to make them laugh instead. Not really fun, but I'm from the deep south, and funerals are the freaking best for food. People from all over town drop off covered dishes and desserts. I'm a simple woman with simple interests. My dad's celebration of life was just that. We didn't call it a funeral at all. We found out too late that he had metastatic melanoma and within 6 weeks he was gone. The party we had was a blend of everyone he knew along his life, from family to high school buddies and co-workers turned friends. We did have the party at the funeral home and, looking back, we could have done it anywhere, but it was centrally located and had plenty of space. We turned on a classic rock Spotify station, put on a slideshow that spanned his entire life and included all facets, hundreds of photos, decorated with his hobbies, and we served his fav, beer and wine with meat and cracker snacks. I like to think he would have had a great time at his party. TLDR, wear sunscreen, even when it's cloudy. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.